Story 1. When you had to rehearse conversations with him in your head just to avoid being yelled at for no reason. Story 2. When my husband's father died, only one of his 7 children showed up to the funeral. My husband. That was only because we were an hour away on our honeymoon, which was just great. We got him a bare-bones gravestone, and when the woman asked if we wanted to write a Hebrew epitaph, that basically means beloved father or another verse, my husband said deadpan. Just the name and date will be fine. She mentioned there were grants available, assuming it was a price issue, and he said, not if you paid me $10,000. She got the message after that. My late father-in-law was a piece of shit. Story 3. When I had to lie to all my friends and teachers about his job, I laughed. He was caught in a prostitution sting with a large amount of cash from illegal sources while my stepmother was pregnant with my little brother. After he divorced my stepmother, he bought a Russian mail-order bride. Story 4. If you have to watch what you say or do because you are afraid of being yelled at. Story 5. When I was 13 or 14, he sat me on his lap in the middle of the living room. He discovered I had stashed some of his pornography magazines and thought it would be a good time to ask if I wanted him to masturbate while I watched. I declined. Luckily, that was all there was to it. I have no idea why I never told my mother. This was my stepfather. My biological father was not in the picture. Story 6. I never knew how he would react to any conversation topic or piece of information. Some days I would get yelled at for something astronomically unimportant, like lighting a candle once. Other days he would take big news oddly well. I was terrified to tell him I was moving in with my partner after college because of my very religious upbringing. I never know what to think or what I can tell him, so I do not talk to him anymore. Story 7. The line between respect and fear was non-existent. I panicked when I heard the car engine die at night, knowing I was about to be dragged out of bed and beaten for being a kid who might have damaged something minor during the day. I still hate my stepmother with all my being for her complicity and excuses. Story 8. He was a fucking Nazi, and I saw him only twice in my life. He died the way he deserved, miserable and alone. Story 9. When my parents got divorced, he did not pay child support and did not try to see us at all. I saw him 3 or 4 times after the divorce. Story 10. One example was when he beat me with a belt at the slightest excuse to get back at the world. He was a coward and a doormat. Story 11. To all of you, I am so saddened by what your childhoods were like. I hope you are able to learn to love better than you were treated. Story 12. Mine had something like 12 kids in the United States alone and raised only one, his daughter from the woman he dragged home from Panama, in turn treating the rest of us like strangers or bastards. Story 13. When I was 7 and already knew what almost every kind of alcohol tasted and smelled like, he would have me guess at office parties he took me to, and if I got a certain number correct we would leave earlier. Spoiler, we never did. Story 14. He regularly tells us that whatever we become does not concern him. His 4 children have grown up with psychological issues because he was so detached from the household, and they all agree that he did not contribute to anyone's upbringing, not even by providing financial support to the household or to our mother. Story 15. I was always jealous of how nice he was to everyone else, except my siblings and me. Story 16. The fact that he went to prison for physically or sexually abusing every family member older than I am is a sign. Story 17. I was told that my father, who was drunk, almost broke my leg with kindling when I was 6. My mother said she was calling the sheriff, and my step-grandfather got my father to stop hitting me. They thought my leg was broken. I was in a daze or shock and completely blacked it out. I cannot remember any of it. All I know is that around this time I began to dislike my father and did not care for my mother. Story 18. My biological father beat me and treated me like garbage, then said it was love. He threatened to end my life when he found out I was transgender at age 5, and he reminded me of it until I cut him off at age 25. I have schizophrenia and will be depressed for the rest of my life because of him. My stepfather bullied and verbally abused me and kept me in Stockholm Syndrome until I was in my 30s. I cut off my mother and my entire family because of him. I am trying to live and make my life better. I work and I am healing, but I struggle mentally every day. I do not trust any man and spend most of my time alone. Story 19. He met my mother, wined and dined her, and slept with her. He was very charismatic, but he skipped town when it came time to raise a child. Story 20. I told him I felt his life would not have been different if I had not been born. He agreed. He said he would not change anything now, he just wanted peace. He is 67. I struggle with abandonment and attachment issues and a deep need to feel accepted and wanted, a feeling I never have. He never cared who I was. He was always focused on being correct financially, paying what he had to, sometimes a little more to ease his conscience. That was not what we needed. Edit. I am sorry for those with violent fathers. My experience feels comparatively tame now, but I do not want to minimize the damage of emotional abandonment. Story 21. Whenever you get upset about something, he yells at you without even trying to address why you feel that way. Story 22. The beatings, the screaming fits, the starvation that forced me to forage for berries in the woods, and the time he tried to drown me using a bottle of hydrogen peroxide were strong hints. Story 23. I had to walk on eggshells, fearing his reactions and dreading his return from work. Story 24. I was 13, walking the streets of Chicago with him. He pointed out a homeless man in a wheelchair holding a sign and a cup and said that the man was probably faking it and at the end of the day gets up and walks around. At 13, I wondered how much he could be making for that to be true. Years later, I am fortunate that my experiences and education showed me truth over bias. Story 25. He was never around. I never saw him at birthdays, sporting events, or school activities. He showed no interest. Admittedly, he died when I was 1, but still. Story 26. My dad was an elementary school teacher and would never show up to any of our school events during the day because he could not be bothered to take the day off. This included our 7th grade graduation. Story 27. When other kids were happily talking about their dads, I wondered, what is a dad? Story 28. An immature father makes things much harder. You will be dragged into a wave of constant mistakes and setbacks. If you are a woman reading this and thinking about marriage, please look closely at the kind of man he is and at his financial stability. The truth is you are signing up for a roller coaster of failures if you do not. My father has always made reckless financial decisions that put our family at risk. He repeatedly quit stable jobs to chase business ventures without saving, took loans, then returned to work just to repay the debt, only to leave again for another business idea. This has been happening since before I was born, and my mother and the rest of us have suffered the consequences ever since. Now much of that responsibility has fallen on my shoulders. A financially stable, strict father who communicates little with the family is far better than an immature father with unstable finances and poor decision-making. Story 29. Shout out to the book Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson. Story 31. Last Sunday I, 20, realized that when Mum says Dad will pick up my younger brother or make dinner, my mind immediately assumes he will not or will do it horribly wrong by default. My father was so emotionally and physically unavailable that I still do not trust him to do better or to follow through on things he said he would. 2. My father is the last person I think of calling when I need help. I do not think to call him even about things that are his responsibility unless someone mentions it. The option of calling him simply does not occur to me. 3. There is nothing I need him to do. Everything he does for me are things I could do myself or ask someone else to handle. My weeks are less stressful and happier when he is not involved. Last week, I only wanted to know where to find a few screws and the cordless screwdriver. To do something for my kitten. Instead of telling me and letting me do it, he insisted he would do it on Sunday. He did it that time, then acted as if it was terrible that I had asked and as if the task was a huge favor. I did not ask him to do it and I would never ask him now. Story 31. For starters, he had affairs with multiple staff members. So that is clear. Story 32. He conditioned me to feel depressed as a child and made me miss him, then moved out of state. That summer I met the woman he married, but he never told my sister or me. I was 13 and my sister was 6. Apparently the rest of the family, including cousins and the new wife's children who were my age, got to attend the wedding. I found out he was married because my stepmother called our landline and her last name had been changed to ours. When I asked him why we were not invited, he told me to ask my stepmother. When I asked her, she told me to ask him, so I never got an answer. Later, when I saw my stepmother putting pictures of the wedding into photo albums, I asked to see them. She handed them to me, and as I looked through the pictures, I happened to look up at her face. She sat there with a smug smirk, seemingly pleased that I was sad I had not been allowed to attend. Story 33. They were never around. I do not know. I was raised by a single mother and my grandparents. Story 34. I was scared he would appear one day and try to kidnap me from school. My stepdad was a whole other story. I became a teen parent to my siblings because he would not parent, clean, or do anything but shout and kick us with steel-toe boots. As a result, I developed incredible reflexes and was able to turn and catch his foot before he could touch me. Story 35. He would forget little things constantly, even with multiple reminders, even the night before an important event. Events that mattered to me, true father-son events. He was just busy. I remember I started down that same path. Now, when my grandson comes over, it is playtime. Squirt guns, wiffle ball, games. I need a day to rest after he leaves, but I beat him to king of the mountain with the squirt guns. Tomorrow is a board game night. Last night we played to see who could eat 2 popsicles the fastest without getting brain freeze. If he is here, I am usually engaged in something with him. I remember the Harry Chapin song, Cats in the Cradle. I do not want my grandson to grow up alone. He has a mother and 2 sisters, but it is not the same. He needs to be able to come over and say to me, "Papa, Zoe is being a jerk to me." I do not have to fix it. I just have to listen. He is a 6-year-old boy with twin sisters 3 years older. Sometimes he feels lost. He is also showing signs of a disability. We are leaning toward autism. He is being tested at the end of the year. It is not my job to fix it, but it is my job to tell him, to teach him that it is going to be all right. Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon. Little Boy Blue and the Man in the Moon. When are you coming home, Papa? Story 36. I always default to thinking I'm wrong or at fault in any disagreement. It's maddening because I can logically realize I'm the victim of a situation and still feel like I'm to blame. Cheers, Dad. Story 37. My dad was not as bad as many terrible fathers, but he was rarely around. When he was present, he was not a good example. Subtle racism, misogyny, and homophobia. That kind of behavior. Story 38. Where do I begin? Imprisoning my siblings and me for nearly a decade. Full lockdown, apocalypse-style survival mode, barricaded windows, and no contact with the outside world. He would sometimes move us to another house and leave us without groceries for a month at a time. He physically abused us, beating us with a horse whip, even the 3-year-old. That was the hardest thing to endure. Watching my baby siblings get hurt and not being able to help. He subjected us to mental abuse and forced us into a religious cult. He also abused my mother in front of us, threatened us, and said he could make anyone who opposed him disappear or make it look like an accident. He denied medical care to all of us, including my mother during each pregnancy. She did not leave him. He hid asthma medication from my siblings. My sister nearly died once. He used his children like slaves, and then finally walked out of our lives and disappeared for good. That was 5 years ago. I worked hard to make a life for everyone. I love my siblings and would die for them, but I sincerely hope he dies in the most agonizing way. Sorry for the long text. Laughing out loud. Story 39. As my mother's cancer progressed, she could not defend me from him. I remember her getting out of bed, coming between us and asking him to stop. He hit her instead. I can still see her crumpled on the floor in the hallway and my grandmother helping her back into bed. She did not cry. My mother committed suicide just months later. I was 10 years old. My father stopped the beatings after I started fighting back. I remember him throwing a punch. I slipped under it and the force put him off balance and he fell. He never tried it again. I was maybe 12 or 13. I hated the boarding school, but it was far away and he never called. I am sure I am not alone. The whole world, including relatives and neighbors, thought my father was dad of the century and the nicest guy in the world. People would say he was a great guy and that he knew how to laugh. I wish I had met that man. I took care of him when he developed dementia. In the last 6 months, he spoke maybe 10 words to me. He provided the basics. I received a decent education and learned a work ethic. Despite his anger issues, he was an honest businessman, but he should never have been a parent. Story 40. He never encouraged me when I pointed the flashlight in the wrong direction. Story 41. I slept in the comic book store for a month after my mom kicked me out on my 16th birthday for smoking a joint. My stepmother slammed the door in my face because she was trying to become pregnant by other men, while my father, a hippie, was at work dressing mannequins and using drugs. Story 42. Absence of connection. Once I graduated high school, I saw mine about a handful of times before he passed. Story 43. He probably drugged me the first night I met him and then continued to drug, beat, and starve me for 3.5 months. Story 44. Shout out to the book Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. Story 45. You do not remember a single word of advice from him. He was not a horrible dad and was always physically present, but he was not very engaged with his children. Story 46. When I was a child, he poked me in the face with his big dirty fingers and yelled at me to stop crying or making a sad face. He beat me through my teens into my 20s. At 19, he called me a piece of meat for wearing a bathing suit on vacation, then beat me for saying that was wrong. He argues with women and degrades me and my mother. Now he tells me that I need help for standing up against abuse. Story 47. He made my 2 sisters and me sleep upstairs in freezing conditions while he and my mother kept a wood stove by their bedroom. We lived in New Hampshire, so the winters could be brutal. If I went to bed with a glass of water, it would be frozen solid in the morning. I used to go downstairs in the middle of the night and lie on top of the heat vent in the bathroom. Story 48. Chasing him from bar to get him to stop drinking and gambling. I was then forced to sell the family home to cover his debts. Story 49. He left when my mother was 3 months pregnant, married her best friend a week before I was born, and I have a younger half-sister who is 4 months younger than me. I met him once in my life when I was 17. Story 50. When your dad makes you his chief forger for his business at the tender age of 17, he tells you that if you are caught you will not go to jail because you are under the age of 18. Story 51. My grandfather projected all his ambitions onto my father because my uncles, fine as they were not expected to attend college. At the same time, my grandfather insisted that my father give him his scholarship funds, which he then put into a savings account. The older my father gets, the more upset he is about how he was treated. I have had trouble with my father over the years. He is not a good listener, stubborn, and opposed to authority. Back in the day, he could get grumpy when he was tired or stressed. But overall, he was not a selfish person. Story 52. I would not know because my dad was the best. His father was a furious terror, and he was not going to pass on that legacy. I am extremely grateful to him. Story 53. Giving me alcohol at the age of 3 disqualified him from being an advocate for my safety and care. Story 54. My mom taught me to lie about what I did while he was at work. I cleaned all day like a slave child. She never let me touch my computer. I became a good liar before I was 10. She showed me the best hiding places in the house. Our dog stood between me and him and began an angry growl, as if about to attack. I was told I was trash every day. Now I'm depressed. Time for the Golden Girls, dog love, and middle fingers pointed down to hell, where that evil bastard now lives. Thank you to the incompetent doctor who turned liver disease into massive organ failure. I owe you my life. Story 55. Where do I even start? He is a serial liar who always finds fault in others and never in himself. He often weaponizes his incompetence. I do not think he is very smart, and sometimes he simply does not care. I am not a fan of diagnosing people, so take this with a grain of salt, but my family and I believe he is a narcissist. I have too many stories to tell, but here are a few. When my sister and I were little, our mother often worked overnight, and he regularly left us home alone. We later discovered he was cheating on our mother. By my 6th birthday, he had eaten my entire birthday cake the night before. Once he said he was proud to be a racist. He manipulated my sister against our mother, and they have barely seen each other in the last 10 years. My sister still lives with him. He is very good at playing the victim. I maintain limited contact with him only because I do not want to lose contact with my sister. Story 56. After turning 18, he stopped asking how you were or whether you needed anything. Story 57. You spent nights with the rest of your family in your room, holding the lock while he screamed and beat on the door from the other side. Story 58. You may feel uncomfortable around men or male authority figures. You may assume other men are in charge. You may be afraid to ask for things or to advocate for yourself. Story 59. Hitting, yelling, insulting, nicer to other people's kids, making you feel like you must be the problem. He is gone now, and I have learned a lot about his childhood over the years that helps contextualize, but does not excuse the father he was. Looking back, I see a man who was trying to fight his own demons, and I recognize that he was a loving father who was not raised with many examples of how to be one. Story 60. He beat me with random objects because I drank his booze and stole his weed. When I turned 12, he beat me because I stole his Trans Am and shot my sister in the head. At 14, he taught me how to drink Bacardi 151 properly, but beat me because my math skills were poor. He began kicking me instead of punching me when I was 15 and shipped me from Maryland to North Carolina. There, now a proper alcoholic, I was arrested so many times that they sent me to a place called Samarkand Manor in Eagle Springs, North Carolina, where staff put me on tranquilizers that made me sleep 15 hours a day for 244 days in a forest. By the time I turned 16, I was ready to kill. I better stop here. Story 61. He got me into a fight with my mom because he would promise to come see me or pick me up and then ghost me. When I told him to either be consistently there for me or not at all, he chose not to be there. That is pretty subpar parenting, I would say. Story 62. My dad was a pastor. I do not believe in God. He forced me into the church, and when I grew bigger than him, he stopped hitting me and began to emotionally abuse me. I had 2 brothers and 1 sister. They always followed him and attended church. They received all the praise, attention, emotional support, and financial support. At family gatherings, he constantly shamed me for not attending church and mocked me for failing at life. He is dead now, so hooray, I guess. Story 63. Well, he was racist, a bigot, and physically abusive. Which reason do you want? Story 64. Maybe he wasn't in the picture at all while I was growing up. I met him when I was 17. Years later, the stepmother agreed to take care of my daughter while I was in the hospital. I got out 10 days later and they were gone. The bastard literally kidnapped my daughter and even changed her name. She was 2 at the time and I didn't get her back until she was 12. When the son of a bitch died, I vowed to piss on his grave. I finally did that a couple of years ago. My dad? Oh, he was the best. Story 65. Favoring one child over another. I did not ask to be born. I am not sorry for having a mind of my own. I do not follow the crowd. I still remember when my father beat me on my bare bottom when I was 7 years old. It is one of many reasons why I am moving abroad. Story 66. When he held a loaded gun in the living room and said, "Take it and kill me." Story 67. Mine is not as terrible, but still bad. He does not remember things about me. He forgets that I am not allowed to eat peanuts, and when I told him, he snarled that doctors just make excuses to take people's money. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.